Welcome to Pearls on a Pig podcast with Charlotte and Dolly, where we uncover everything you should know about Vegas philanthropy. Let's head to the studio now and see what we've unpacked in this episode. Hello, Charlotte.
Dolly, it's been a day. How are you?
I am well. How about you?
Well, navigating life in this beautiful city that we live in, so noticing a lot of things happening, and I'm glad we're here to just help the community hear a different side that they probably wouldn't understand to even look for.
Right. So, with that, let's talk about what we've heard and what's going on lately in the community.
Absolutely. I just had a phone call the other day. Non-profits we've discussed as a whole, even on a national level, have been hit by this administration and things of that nature. However, a friend of mine called, they were let go. They had to lay off over 70% of the staff, basically. And for me, that was a huge red flag. And that just made me question, were they highly dependent on one income source? Did they not do their due diligence to have multiple sources? Non-profit is a relationship building mechanism to connect folks to the resources and connect the community to help with those resources. And so, how do we find out what the true intentions are of some of these non-profits? So, what's your take?
70% of their staff being laid off is, a lot for any organization. I mean, even the corporate business world, right? But I'm thinking, you mentioned one source of income. I'm wondering if a lot of that isn't just because donor dollars are earmarked for specific things in terms of programs as opposed to operating or being able to pay the staff. I mean, which is unfortunate that, some donors don't allow funding to go in that direction, but what happens to their programs now with 70% of their staff being laid off? Who's running their programs? Are their programs even still around?
Absolutely. So, with the cut like that, programs get affected. And then you think about the people who are receiving the resources in these programs, they get affected. So when we talk about how nonprofits are connecting to the community, but again, with that kind of layoff, you now have done such damage. And to even try to come back from that. Or let's say the CEO decides to start another nonprofit, you have lost a major trust factor with the community because it looks like from a donor and philanthropist viewpoint that you were not fiduciary responsible, right? And that's a huge deal. I agree with you on donors not wanting to allow some of their funding to go towards programmatic or not programmatic operational needs. But that's a huge factor. Not all nonprofits can depend on just volunteers because, as you know, volunteer is as you please, as you go. And so to keep somebody so dedicated, we do want to pay them. We know that there's not a lot of money in nonprofit, but if the passion's there and there's an alignment, then it'll work out for everybody. So again, where was the fiduciary responsibility? Where was the board? Did they notice this? Right, like there's a lot of hands in the bucket that help an organisation thrive. And there's also a lot of hands not in the bucket that will assist in the organisation failing. So where's that? Where's that median of who's taking responsibility?
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about that too, the interesting part is that happened, right here in our city in Las Vegas with an organization. I mean, it's happened with several, but I mean, one at the top of my list that I can recall recently happening and being in the news was a faith-based organization, a very large one. It's been around a long time, had a CEO or an executive director running the organization for, greater part of 2 decades, and somehow found a way to mismanage funds and get rid of the board. She had that much power and then land herself at another organization in that same role. And then finally end up on a board of another nonprofit in a financial position. So where is the board oversight? Where is any of this oversight? I mean, you're talking auditors, CPAs that are looking at this stuff. How did it get to that point when audits are to be done annually? So really, 12 months would have been the most you could have let something go, but 25 years?
That's a lot. That's definitely a lot. And even to go from one nonprofit to another, knowingly being dismissed or being asked to be dismissed, because that's the other part too. How many of these stories do we hear where executive directors or CEOs are moving from one nonprofit to another, but yet it's not disclosed on why they've left, right? So they're now putting another organization at risk. And then again, are the new organizations taking this person on? Are they that desperate, right? Like you're willing to risk some things and you're that desperate to bring somebody on who you may have knowingly, heard of their mishaps at another organization. And so again, where's the accountability, like you said? Where's the oversight? Who's taking responsibility for that? And at the end of the day, these are organizations that are here to provide a service to the community. And yet we are crying about how people need to, pick themselves up by the bootstraps and do this, that, and the other. But some of them are literally working class and they still need a little assistance. And so when they have been dependent or they know that the resource is there, and when they go there, it's gone, now we have exemplified the problem, right? So how does that get fixed?
Well, it's funny that you talk about all of that because that was just part A of the story. That same organization goes and hires another CEO who is literally doing the exact same thing that the previous one did. And not only that, is facing serious charges and paying his wife a salary when she doesn't even work for the organization. Closing the door unannounced to the public who are going there for basic necessities and services to live, and finding out that there's no resources there anymore. But then to boot, what if you're a donor who dropped $500,000 at this same organization? Knowing that all of this has happened, I mean, are you crying in the corner? You just gave $500,000 away to somebody who not once, but twice has been on the evening news for fraud.
I mean, at that point, when you have the second part of a CEO or executive director doing the same thing that the previous one has done, and the whole part about paying the spouse or family member, here's the thing. I'm all about nepotism, right? Like, you want to bring your family in, but you don't want to extort the organization either. Like, who in their right mind, right? And so, again, here's the trust factor that has steadily been declining with nonprofits in the community because of things like this, right? This is why people question why executive directors or CEOs get paid a certain amount. And I always try to look at it from a business sense. It's like, look, if the CEO is responsible for fundraising $2, $3, $4, $5 million and they've got a staff of, I don't know, 6, 7, then by all means, they are so worth the 100 grand that they're making, right? And so you have to look at it from a business sense. But then when you have that level of nepotism, you are literally extorting the organization, which means you are extorting from the people that actually need the services from the organization. And now we have a collapse, right? So that to me, and like you said, the donor, what's the donor doing? Has the donor done anything? Have they put out a statement to say they've acknowledged? Or do they want to just be ostriches with their head in the sand?
I don't know. I haven't seen any follow-up from either side. I mean, CEO, very quiet, been called out. Staff all resigned. Staff is now talking to the police. My understanding is the FBI is actually involved too at this point. And we're not talking like just a couple $1,000s. I mean, let me bring up the fact that he was paying his wife $8,500 a month. What was she doing for a salary of that level per month for an organization? That's crazy to me. And so I'm sure there'll be more follow up on that. And in the days and months ahead, we'll see them actually in court. It's just sad because the donor didn't do their part. And I think that that was the key. Have they had their hands in more of what our money is being used for? Let us see, let us look at receipts and be more involved as a partnership as opposed to just check, drop, and walk away. This may not have happened because somebody could have caught that in month 1 or 2, not month 24, 28, 3 years. And now here we are with people banging on a door to get some bread, and the door is closed.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of the due diligence does fall on the donor as well. Like you said, how involved were they even in checking? But also, I want to know how it got past the board, because aren't we not looking at financials? Are we not questioning why we're paying this person $8,500 a month? Why is that not questionable? But yet we want to question lower staff, right? With overtime or whatever the case may be, like God forbid. But at a senior or executive level, we don't question it. Everybody needs to be questioned. Every dime needs to be questioned and accounted for. And if it's not for the better good for the organization, then what are you doing as an organization? And a lot of that, again, falls on the board, because the board is the one who approves and hires the CEO or executive director. You know, they still have to be answered to and for. So where's that accountability? Because I feel like, no, I'm sorry. I was going to say, yeah, I just feel like it's gotten to the point now where people who are becoming part of these boards, it's just a check mark on their resume to say, I'm part of this, and I want to be the popular one.
It's funny. Go ahead. I think you mentioned something really interesting about the board, right? So, if this particular organization allowed the executive director to handpick the board, which is nonprofit 101, no, no, right? I mean, this is your executive director or CEO should not be involved or have a vote at all in who the members of your board are going to be. And secondly, there was a part where that executive director, CEO, had the ability to remove board members if they didn't align with her vision. So, unfortunately, there was all kinds of red flags here. So, as soon as one did question her ability to manage the money, he was quickly ousted and replaced with someone new. And then the second one that came in was ousted too because they questioned. So it just became a vicious circle of as soon as somebody mentioned, why are you spending XYZ on this? And she didn't like someone questioning her, they were no longer on the board, which is interesting because you saw their board turning over very quickly here in the community. I think over time they had several board CEOs and board presidents, and finally landing on one who didn't question because ultimately he was going to do the same thing. So it was terrible fallout, but we're still in the middle of what's going to happen with him. And he's got an interesting background in himself. I mean, being former law enforcement and then doing this, I mean, how awful of a human do you have to be to do that?
It's degrading, and it's also an insult, right? Like you said, past career in law enforcement. So you literally took an oath to protect and serve, and then you extort a non-profit organization. Basically, that.
Well, you start off with protect and serve, and then you end up with rob and steal. I mean, where it comes full circle, doesn't it?
Literally. And so again, just, keeping a pulse on why nonprofits are struggling right now with even individual donors, because again, the trust level has definitely depleted. Just, it's mind blowing how people would rather just help their neighbor directly without saying anything than give their money to a nonprofit right now. But this will, I think, will weed out those nonprofits who are truly about the organization and the community versus just trying to have a front, I guess. Right. I am doing good, but in the back end, you've just got a whole shenanigan of ridiculousness going on. And you're, like you said, steal, rob, the whole nine. Like, what are we doing here? And why? That's the other question. Why is this happening? And why is it happening more and more? You see these stories on a national level, you see them in other cities, but I feel like because Las Vegas is how it is, it's become a city of scammers, of liars, of just these people putting on a mask to say, I love the community, I do this, I want to be part of this, but really you're just out there for a popularity contest.
Yeah. And so, let's go back to that donor real quick because I think this is the key, right? So, let me explain the process you have to go through for this particular donors fund because it's no joke. This isn't a simple write a one-page grant application and, you've got funding. This is a very lengthy process. It spans over 8 months in order to even receive their funding, right? So you got to put on this big circus act. I'm talking, creating polished and professional videos that could set a nonprofit back $6,000 or $7,000. So now you're spending money to get some of their money, which is so dumb. And then the other part of it is they want to come out and do a tour and they want to do a deep dive and they want to do all this stuff. And it's like, did you really do all that? Because wouldn't you have seen something like this or just a small indicator of anything happening that would have like, hey, maybe this isn't a good fit for us? Or even ask the questions, why is this like this? Right? Instead, you gave a $500,000 away and put your name on the side of a building that is now completely closed, shut. We've got the county stepping in to take the physical building over because this is such a cluster, right?
And I know they all like to talk about the audit and this, but how many times have you heard, audits being manipulated, right? But at the end of the day, their 990s are clear as day, right? Like you can follow the money. That's like the oldest saying for ages and ages, follow the money. And if it doesn't make sense, then question it, right? I know you and I discussed before, there's these nonprofits that put out information. We give out X million dollars a year for, say scholarships or housing or whatever the case may be. But then when you look on their 990, it's like, wait a minute, you said you give out 6 million, but your 990 only shows you gave out 3 million. However, you raised 9 million. So what are we doing?
Yeah, and then the balance sheet doesn't match that at all with what's left over. So, we laugh at this. And even though it's a serious issue, I think that to us, it's funny because we're like, how are other people not seeing what we're seeing? And why aren't they questioning it more? So, why isn't anybody saying, this doesn't look right? Or, can we see where our money actually goes? They make the nonprofit provide a report at the end of the grant cycle. Tell us how our money was spent. Listen, if I'm a person and I'm giving money, I'm not asking you how my money was spent. You're going to show me how my money was spent. Just like I get a receipt at the store when I buy something that says what I bought, we're doing the same thing here. I gave you something in return. I want a receipt for that. And I don't think that these donors are willing to do that for whatever reason. It's really not time consuming, so I don't know why anybody wouldn't. And isn't it important? Especially at that level of money. You're talking $500,000 to one nonprofit, and you don't want to know? Give me a list of all the Jane Smiths and John Does you helped. It's not hard to do.
Yeah, no, you're right. At that level, it's transactional. And like you said, you provide a service, I get a receipt, right? It's just hand in hand. So I think it has obliterated the due diligence on both ends. And people who are giving that amount of money are just excited to the fact that they go through this long, lengthy process. And this organization did X, Y, and Z, and blah, blah, blah. But really, because now it's non existent anymore after decades of being a major source in the community. So, again, where's your due diligence? And who's holding the accountability for this? Because right now, I feel like the board, the donor, everybody who has touched this organization
Yeah.
is at fault for the collapse.
100%. And so you mentioned that. The funny part is there's two people left, right? So this went from a board of 9 or 11. I don't know for certain how much their board count was, but I will tell you it is down to the CEO, who is now under investigation, and it is down to his friend, who is the COO. So no staff, two people sitting on a board, doors locked and closed, county stepping in to take away the building and reopen it under, a government program. And again, I mentioned it was a faith-based organization. So they were backed by a lot of local churches here. So not only did this happen to a very large donor, but all of the Lutheran churches that were supporting this are now questioning what happened, right? I mean, they were asking their parishioners to bring food and items to donate to this nonprofit. And now there is no nonprofit.
Which again puts a damper on the parishioners who hold faith in knowing that they are helping people, right? And so now parishioners have been bamboozled, they have been lied to, manipulated, if you want, you know what I mean? And so that takes a hit on their level of faith in these organizations, right? And so I just feel like I'm so interested in following the story, reading court documents. I want to see what's happening because if this current CEO is basically not run out of town at a certain point, that would make me question our community as a whole, because then we're not holding anybody right to their level of accountability. And that to me is extremely sad.
Yeah. And I guess to kind of wrap that whole conversation up for today is just we'll have to watch the news. I mean, we'll soon see his face all over because he definitely has, some court cases coming up, for a lot of things. And we'll see where he lands. I mean, I'm hoping his career in nonprofit is done because he should never be able to set foot and run an organization or even be on a board ever again for a nonprofit. And in fact, at this point, I literally think that he should not be employable either at this point because he's not a stand-up person. I mean, it's one thing if you're working for corporate America and you get let go for whatever shenanigans you did at work, but you're talking about how low do you have to be to steal from a nonprofit that you're out there telling the community is doing good and you're a good human. I mean, you're disgusting. So I hope he never works again. Yeah.
Agreed. I agree with you 100%. So, well, we shall see. I don't know. Any closing remarks for our first episode?
No, I just think that I hope everyone will tune in because if this one is, a half an hour of just that, we have a lot more to unpack in future episodes. I mean,
I agree. I agree. Well, Dolly, it's been fun.
same here, Charlotte. So we'll see you on the next episode.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to Pearls on a Pig podcast with Charlotte and Dolly. If you want to reach out to us with suggestions for a topic on a future episode, drop us an email at pearlsonapigpodcast@gmail.com.